Well, after the intense heat and intense rain of Hungary in the evenings, it's good to be back in England. Some of the Formula One teams have begun their August break in the sense that they've kind of shut everything down. If you send them an email, it bounces back saying we are currently on the August break. Others are working hard for 2 weeks and will then take a bit of time off. So it's an interesting reflection period, really, particularly after a race like that, the Hungarian Grand Prix. What a race. You watch the first half and you would think, right, okay, both Mercedes made terrible starts. Ferrari are going to win this one, and looks like Lewis and Nico are going to be, the race is going to be for third place. And if you walked away then and then looked at the results, you would have said, what happened here? Daniel Kvyat second, Daniel Ricciardo third. But this is what Hungary is all about. It produces races like this, has done for many years, 30 years indeed, because we were celebrating 30 years of the Hungarian Grand Prix this weekend. And it was a lovely race to watch in that there were incidents aplenty, lots of things going on. But if we look at the final results and where they came from, I think one of the conclusions that you'd have to draw is that Lewis Hamilton was kind of caught more than normally off guard by yet another bad start. I say yet another, he had that poor one in Austria. He's made some pretty good starts as well this year, so I shouldn't be too unkind, but this is the second really bad start he's had to the season, in the season. But I think because his superiority was so great on both Friday and Saturday and in qualifying, and because he was in love with his car perhaps more than I've ever seen him. Chatting to him after qualifying, he was saying, he actually said, he didn't really mean it, of course, he said, I wish people could be in the car to feel what I'm feeling because it was so enjoyable to drive. That was as nice a lap as I've ever driven in my life, was basically what he said. And I think given that, he was completely, not shocked, that would be the wrong word, he was just completely in another world when he wasn't leading the race. And all of a sudden he had a million different game plans with which to play. And we saw what happened. I think on the opening lap, he had a couple of goes at Nico and couldn't get him going into turn two, and then it was a bit scrabbly, and they got to the top, and I think he was literally kind of taken aback by how early Nico braked for that chicane and had no alternative but to just go off, and we know what happened then. He dropped 5 or 6 places, and that really sort of coloured his day. I don't think Nico braked particularly early there, but I think Lewis would have braked probably 3 meters later than Nico, and he was pretty close to him, and that's what threw him off. But let's go back one step further, and that is why he made that bad start. It looks as if the clutch overheated, in which case Nico might have also had the same problem, but other drivers had no issues, particularly the 2 Ferrari drivers, particularly Nico Hülkenberg, who drove a brilliant first lap as well. So maybe it was Lewis being on the pole. He had to sit there longer, and this is all because Felipe Massa pulled up in the wrong grid or wasn't perfectly positioned on his grid slot, which is why they had to do that second lap. So that all, one thing added up, and I suppose when you are on the pole and you have got an additional lap, you are aware of the clutch problem. It's similar to the Monaco situation where the formation lap is so slow that the pole man can get to the grid much sooner, obviously, than the back of the grid and has to wait longer than normal. And we often see pole winners at Monaco having clutch problems as a result. So I think that's kind of what happened with Lewis there. But after that, he did drive well. We saw the pace, but we saw mistakes as well. We saw plenty of lockups, and we saw the Daniel Ricciardo incident at the restart. And I think that was a function of not only, physically what happened in the corner, and I know Lewis's explanation is that he got understeer mid-corner and ran wide and apologised for that later on. He had to apologise, really, I think, because there was no alternative. But I think the problem began by how good Daniel Ricciardo was at the restart. We should remember that he's on the soft tyre and Lewis is on the medium, so that does make a difference, of course. But this is Lewis Hamilton, this is a Mercedes, this is the fastest car-driver combination in Formula One. And for the second time now, we've seen Daniel Ricciardo at a restart, at a safety car restart, just working miracles. He did so in Austin last year when he got Fernando Alonso at turn 1. And he was right on Lewis with exactly the right amount of momentum going into that last corner of the lap, by which time Sebastian had already restarted the race in effect. He'd given it some power. And the timing of Ricciardo as he goes into that corner and then comes out, you can tell is going to be a problem there for Lewis. And this is Lewis, again, not expecting that because it's so unusual at a restart these days to have that sort of thing. And I think all that comes under the heading of, I think, in the position that Lewis is in, this is no excuse whatsoever, it's just an explanation, but in the position Lewis is in, i.e. he's winning a lot of races, and he's doing a lot of that winning from the front, from the pole, he isn't actually doing as much racing with the guys as he used to. And therefore he doesn't, if you said to Lewis before the race, who do you think at the moment is the best driver at restarts, he probably wouldn't have said Daniel Ricciardo. And yet, if you're watching it very closely, watching Formula 1 closely, that would be the answer. Equally, if you said to Lewis, how does Marcus Ericsson go into a corner relative to Felipe Nasr? The sort of information Lewis would have had in his brain when he was at GP2 level, I don't think he'd have an answer for that either, because he doesn't really have to pay attention to these guys anymore. But of course, it is important when you are driving a catch-up race, as Lewis was driving, to know that Marcus Ericsson has a much later turn-in than Felipe Nasr, and to allow for that, or to take advantage of that, or whatever you're going to do. So it's a function of becoming a winning, very successful racing driver that you do inevitably lose that ability to be able to read what other people are going to do. On top of that, of course, he went too quick. He ran. I think he was just completely shocked that Daniel was there at the restart, and he just tried to squeeze him out, which is what racing drivers do, and we've seen that happen. And so, from Lewis's point of view, a very frustrating race. All of it triggered by that slow start and being blown away by the two Ferraris and Nico going into the first corner, which completely upset his equilibrium. And I guess a lot of fans are going to say, isn't that great for Formula One because we've got a different race, we've had different winners. And purely from a statistical point of view and from a racing point of view, you'd have to agree with them. From a Lewis Hamilton point of view, you'd have to say it was a perfect weekend up until Saturday night, Sunday morning. And then when the race started, it all became very, very different. Had Lewis won the start, had he managed to capitalise on his pole position and led out of turn 1, I think he would have won the Hungarian Grand Prix. Of course, we'll never know. Ferrari did look pretty good on occasions, but let's talk about Ferrari now, because Sebastian Vettel was just fabulous, I thought, and what a nice driver and person he's evolving into. He's been that person for a long time, but now he's a serious player at Ferrari. He's got that win at Malaysia, and now, of course, he has the win in Hungary. But he's still very much the same Sebastian Vettel we've known in Formula One for 5 or 6 years now. I think he's unchanged, and I love the way in Hungary he chose to ride to the track on a retro Suzuki, very like the 1972, well, actually it's probably 71, when I first came over from Australia in 72, I'd read in a magazine that Chris Craft, very fast, good, quick, intelligent British racing driver, who did a little bit of Formula One, but mainly known for his sports and saloon car racing. Chris Craft had this 250 Suzuki that he used to ride around in. I read about that, and I thought, wow, that's a really cool bike to have. And when I came over to England, I discovered quite early on that bike was actually for sale. So I bought it, and I rode the ex-Chris Craft Suzuki 250 around London for a couple of years, working for David Phipps, picking up Kodachrome film, dropping off Kodachrome film, picking up typed manuscript, all the things that you do when you're apprenticing a great photojournalist like David Phipps. But I did that on my 250. And the bike that Sebastian is riding, it's not exactly the same one he had in Austria, but very similar. It's exactly the same as that bike, same frame and everything, except mine was a 250 and Seb's is a 500, much quicker bike, of course. And you'll notice that in this picture, the left side rear indicators come loose and it's pointing downwards. Well, you'll be pleased to know, I think, that after the picture was taken, I went over and screwed it up and got it pointing in the right position. But Seb, completely relaxed and enjoying every minute of his time in Formula One, and particularly at Ferrari, made a great start and then just drove a peerless race from start to finish. Thoroughly deserved it. Brilliant to see Ferrari win. I'm a big fan of Maurizio Arrivabene as well. So I'm very pleased for him, and a huge fan of James Allison. What an engineer. What a very clear, methodical mind he has. A real aviator's engineer mind, and it's always a pleasure to talk to him. So congratulations to them. Kimi Raikkonen did a pretty good job alongside Sebastian. Might have raised his stock a little bit, I think, in terms of what his future might be in 2016. There's talk about the fact that Kimi has this option with Ferrari, which Ferrari may take up. Personally, I think they probably won't take it up, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they won't run him in 2016. That means go back to square one and let's perhaps do a new deal if we do decide if we're going to keep him. But we'll see what happens with Kimi. Lots of other things to talk about. I think that's probably enough for this first video. There's a few other issues, particularly the Force India spate of problems, and Daniel Ricciardo too. I want to talk to him. So we'll talk about that in the next video coming up.